Tar star Cate Blanchett's central performance is a favorite after the two-time Oscar winner walked away with BAFTA, Golden Globe, and Critics' Choice Prizes. Todd Field's psychological drama about a lesbian conductor's rise and fall landed 6 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, Director, Original Screenplay, Cinematography, and Film Editing, in addition to Cate Blanchett's nod for Best Actress. Writer-director Todd Field's first feature in 16 years is by far his most confident. Abandoning the tropes of a conventional thriller that may or may not have the big plot twist that many lean on, which depends on your interpretation of the movie, instead, he replaces them with a suspenseful and deeply provocative tale of power, intrigue, and mystery. As Oscar season winds down, I caught up with Blanchett one more time to talk about Tar and her experiences on the campaign trail. I began by asking her what she remembered about her first Oscar nomination in 1998 for Elizabeth.
Yeah, well, because it was such an unusual film, it was really at the head of that sort of Bollywood meets West hybrid. Shekhar Kapoor directing it, and we had a famous soccer star, Eric Cantona, playing the Duke of Anjou, and we had people from the North playing English lords and ladies, which within English culture just kind of traditionally hadn't happened at that point. It felt like such a bizarre, potentially, ending my career before I'd begun moment. So the fact that people lent into it, and it was my first time, talking to people who were passionate about a film that I'd been in. It was very early on. So the whole thing was such a steep learning curve. And then to be nominated I thought people were joking when they said I had an Academy nomination. Yeah. It was a really, incredible moment. And I was suddenly in conversation with people that I'd admired my whole life and couldn't believe I was in the same room as them. I still can't, because I think every job you do, it's quite an interesting process. I think the more you do, the more you realize you don't know anything. So you let go of every film after you've made it. And, if you're involved in the post-production process as I was on this one, you have to try and find the film afresh, and then you have to talk to people about it, which of course is another process again. But yeah, it's, this particular one, I felt I was starting at ground zero again, because I knew nothing about the world in which it took place. Yeah. And she was such an enigmatic character. And the conversation, that is alive in the film felt so kind of dangerous, but vital. I was so excited, but nervous to think about how an audience might receive it. And once again, I thought, well, that's the end of everything.
Yeah. I'd like to thank you publicly for getting Todd Field out of this 16-year break, because I've missed him very, very much, and he's a very, very important voice to cinema.
He is.
And his crowning work, and that says something, because I'm such a big fan of Little Children and In the Bedroom very much. How does he compare to all the great directors that you have worked with throughout your career?
Well, Scorsese talks about directing as always knowing your skill is that you need to know where to put the camera. If you cast it well, and your pre-production has been great, and you've got the right production design and costume design and all of those things, cinematographer, then you need to know how to look at who you're looking at, what you're looking at. And Todd every single day would know where to put the camera. And he'd set it up and he goes, no, it needs to be 2 feet to the left. Jib up a bit. Yeah. Okay. He was so meticulous and, diligent about and laser sharp with his focus. But yet, as a director, I don't know whether this comes from him being a jazz musician and an actor himself, is he's so fluid. Yep. It's almost like somebody else wrote the screenplay other than him. I'd often go up to him and I'd say, look, say in the opening shot of the film where I'm backstage and the character's backstage, and she's hearing all of these sounds in the script. There was a long description of all the things that she was hearing because she's got this thing called misophonia, which is a hypersensitivity to sound. So people unwrapping sweet wrappers and the tops off bottles. And there were obviously a lot of cutaways to those things. And I was looking at the time. I said, don't we need to get all these cutaways? He said, no, I'm not going to do any of that. So he'd responded to what was going on in the performance and decided he didn't need to shoot that. And so that's the wonderful thing about working with him is the screenplay is one resource to make the film. He's always in search of the film, which is a really, really exciting environment to be in. Wow. Everything's up for grabs.
Yeah. So you got to keep him working. Tell him to get back to work now because I can't wait 16 more years.
But the amazing thing about him is, we all focus on the fact that he hasn't made a feature film, but in that time, he has been experimenting with lenses, with lighting, with cameras, with perspective. He's always looking and always listening. He's so alive as a human being, and meanwhile, what all good artists do is they actually live their life and they don't live their life to put it on screen. He's had such a rich life. And I think all of these things have been brought to bear on the film. I think that's why, even though the film is dealing with a lot of thorny, big questions, watching people do unpalatable things that we often do when we're in private, it's very human and really funny. Yeah. He's a really, really funny guy.
He's the best. I'd like to thank you for also coming to my Nina Haas fan club meeting today.
We have the T-shirts.
Yes, we have the T-shirts. And I'm not going to stop talking about her until the entire world knows how special she is to this medium of cinema because she is so talented.
And such a great collaborator.
Yeah.
Her perspective on the character of Sharon Goodenough, who is life partners with Lydia Tarr, just was a complete revelation for Todd and I. It opened up a whole subterranean layer in the film about who enables the powerful. And what is the sort of the benefit, the extraneous benefit from keeping the system of power as it is. And it's not always the person at the top who is the most powerful. It's not the most public facing person in a relationship who is often the most powerful. There is such a thing as a kingmaker. And so she brought that aspect to Sharon and said, I don't think she's entirely innocent. And which was the conversation with her was so enlivening. Yeah, she's a wonderful team player and such an exquisite and surprising actress. I was so lucky to finally get to work with her.
My favorite romantic lead of yours of your entire career is definitely Nina Haas.
Me too.
I will always cherish that. I have to ask about the Tar short that was in Berlin that will only screen once, and I wasn't told about it.
Look, I'm sorry. It was a long way, Clayton. No, it was because
I would have flown in.
I did say to Todd, eventually whatever the equivalent of the DVD sale is in the future, would he consider putting it on? It was part of the process. That's what was because it's a film about process. It's not a film about performance. It's not about the result. It's about the way we get to an end point, because works of art like human beings are unfinished businesses. So we decided to try and have quite an open-ended process. And it was fantastic because a lot of the audiences have picked up on a lot of the subtextual stuff that we filmed, thinking this probably won't make it to the final cut, but we're going to film it anyway. And we had enough material that I said to Todd, why don't you make this into a short? So he and Monica Willie, one of the world's great editors, made a short out of it. And so I'm trying to convince him to sort of release it in some way. That's what Criterion's for.
We could just get that going.
Yeah.
So one thing that I've loved so much about you, and you are considered, and by many of us, to be one of the greatest living actresses. And
by my mom, by my husband.
Yeah.
You've been talking to them?
Yeah. But what I love about you is that you take that responsibility seriously. And what I say by that is you use your platform, your status to also champion other actors. You talked a lot about this season, Michelle Yeoh, Andrea Riseborough, Tang Wei, who wasn't nominated.
Tang Wei's performance in Decision to Leave was one of the great performances this year. Guzlawi Malanda. I mean, one of my favorite films of this year was Saint-Omer, Alice Diop, and I mean, both actresses were extraordinary.
I had a joke with one of my colleagues here earlier in the season, like way before I even saw. I was like, "We're gonna have Nina Hoss and Tang Wei for me this year." I was like, "This is too much of a perfect world." But yeah, you take that responsibility to champion them. I want to ask you: does it ever get? It's gotta be frustrating sometimes that I think people, and I mean the public, forget that this is an art form. That's something that you really deeply care about. So there's like the celebrity aspect, that's the public facing thing. But you all are giving yourselves to something that you love. Does that ever frustrate you sometimes that gets lost in messaging when you take on a role such as Lydia Tarr? They think it's like, they see the facing part of it is like, okay, you got an Oscar nom for it, but you believed in the project, you believed in the movie, you believed in the vision that was Todd Field, like what he had to say. Does that ever get lost?
Look, I think it's wonderful when the creative risks one takes are recognized or rewarded, or that and, you know, both Todd and I really, really respect and value that relationship with an audience. And, you know, that the people the audience picks up on things that you could only dreamt that they would pick up on. That's really rewarding. And when different critics groups or industry groups recognize that work, that is wonderful. But in the process of making it, and I hazard a guess that this is the same for all films that are being celebrated, or maybe celebrated in the future, because not all films find their audience straight away. You know, as you say, that's what these libraries are for online and, you know, in actuality, you know, to discover films later that didn't necessarily rise to the surface that particular year.
That's Justice for Bandits, by the way. But go ahead.
Yeah, always. I love making that movie.
Yeah.
But, you know, you can't, in the process of it, I think a film that's going to cut through is one that feels like you are just in the process of making it you are on the edge of a precipice in some way, you know, that you're risking something that you may not be able to pull this off, you know, like standing on the podium in front of the Dresden Philharmonic. It's like, this may not work, you know, and so it's a dance that you do, not only with the cast members and of course the director and the cinematographer, but with the crew, you know, and I felt, maybe it's coming out of the pandemic, but it felt like we were all tightly knit and on that same adventure. And I think it's, you know, it's such a surprising, wonderful pleasure to be able to speak and be in dialogue with an audience about something that you've been so passionate about. But does that answer your question?
It does. You know, because
do you ask him?
I mean, does it frustrate you when people talk about what you do and what the other actors do so superficially, not seeing it as, I think you see acting as art. Like, this is an art form for you. Whereas
I think it's an empathetic art form.
Yeah.
And I think look, I think there's as many different types of actors and processes as there are genres and movies. And if you look at this year, it is such an eclectic array of visions, you know, and I think that when they're all smashed together and they're meant to make one homogenous whole, that's a little bit depressing because their ambitions are so wildly different, you know, and that there's no one actor, there's no one director, there's no one movie. Is that my personal taste is so wildly eclectic, you know, and so I think it's probably to be expected because, you know, sometimes the way we do interface, because there's so much on, there's so much to do, there's so much preoccupying all of us. We can't be deep about everything. Sometimes we have to have a glancing conversation. But I mean, the thing with this particular film, you know, in the hands of Todd Field, I do think it will stand the test of time. So people who haven't had the chance to see it and experience the sound, like the sound in this film is so extraordinary. We'll hopefully have the chance to do so in the future, you know.
Oh, for sure. Thank you for that. I'm going to touch one more thing about if you won an Oscar this year, aside from it being your third, you will bring to life the 9-year prophecy that we believe that Cate Blanchett only wins Oscars every 9 years.
Is that right?
Yes.
Oh God, you're really dating me.
And Blue Jasmine.
Was that long ago?
So if you win this year, just know that you are free, like
very
to
lucky
do
lady.
the circuit for the next 9 years. But looking at all your Oscar nominations, Elizabeth, The Aviator, which you won, Supporting Actress, Notes on a Scandal, which is quietly kind of one of my top 3.
That was a fun one.
That's my
jam.
That
was a fun one.
I'm Not There, and Elizabeth the Golden Age, Blue Jasmine, Carol, and now Tar. Very few people will ever know what it feels like to get an Oscar nomination, let alone have an Oscar. I know you've expressed gratitude about receiving this from your peers and feeling this honor. What does it feel like as you continue down that path? Because Hollywood used to have this idea that women stop being interesting after a certain age. They wouldn't make movies or give great roles for women over a certain age. And you're killing it now, still continuously. And I've seen a shift in that industry. Are you feeling that as well?
Well, we're still talking about it,
yeah.
aren't we? But if, you look at the SAG Awards this year, I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis, Michelle Yeoh, all of so many of the women up there were have had long, illustrious careers, and I am so grateful to the women before me who have been trailblazers. The Jane Fondas, the Meryl Streeps, the Liv Ullmans, from all different cultures, the Helen Mirrens and Judi Dench, we're talking about Judy, and who have really continually pushed the boundaries and supported women coming up underneath them, but also the fact that you've got female showrunners, female producers, female directors. Hopefully in 5 years' time, it's an unremarkable thing, but unfortunately, I think. And particularly speaking of Tar in the classical music world, being female is still seen as being a political act. We're still remarking on it, and hopefully we will get to the point where it is unremarkable. But my concern too is not just the pointy end, the acting end of it. I think it's also making sure that the crews are diverse, not only culturally, and from a gender point of view, but also generationally.
Yep.
I think it's really important that generationally, there's a lot of that sort of generational divide that is, and the power of people in their advanced position of their career versus the powerlessness that people at the beginning of their career seem to be expected to have or may have in relation to that. That's very much alive in the film. So I think, that generational sharing of the goods, I think, is really important.
That's Cate Blanchett, Oscar-nominated star of Tar. The film is now playing on Peacock.